Like the Real Housewives of Max Verstappen up in here.
Checo's checked out.
Joe Lonyu is off the track. That steak is cooked.
A lot, I gotta say, a lot is at stake for Steak F1.
Man, even the broadcast couldn't handle that stat.
My heart almost was screaming like, how can anybody be a Lewis Hamilton fan?
No.
Not on my 2024 bingo card.
Yeah, gonna have to create a new one now.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Lights Out Latest. I am Marina, and I'm here with Jason and Tristan. Unfortunately, Steven is sick, but he will hopefully be back with us next week. Let's get right into it. It was a very, I don't want to say a very hectic race, because it definitely wasn't, but it was a very hectic weekend. With, first and foremost, all the Senna celebrations. Seb back on the grid just, warms my heart so much. I don't know.
He's so involved too, man. When he does come back, it's 100%, right? There's whenever he has organized or anything like that, he puts his whole heart and soul into it. So in general, we love to see Seb back, and in full, it was such a heartwarming experience to even see what they were doing. So
yeah, he organized that run / walk / bike / electric scooter because of
Lewis.
All the time doing whatever they wanted to do with that in honor of Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger, because I did a video on that and I accidentally said Ronald for the first time I said his name, and then I said Roland, and I was roasted so hard in the comments by 10,000 people. So my apologies. It is Roland, and he is Austrian. I know that, even if I misspoke. But they died in Imola in 1994, so it was a very cute little tribute. At the start
Vettel drove his 1993 car, right? That was the last winning.
Yes.
I believe it was
McLaren.
the 93 one. Yep.
I think he owns that car, right?
He does. He owns that one. He owns a couple more. I think he owns some of his cars too, some of the Red Bulls and the old Toro Rosso.
I would love it. I'm sorry, I want to cut you off, but I would love it if he could do a garage tour, if that doesn't already exist.
Yeah. I remember when Charles did one, because he has some of his older cars in Monaco. Yeah. And he did a Monaco vlog, and then he went and showed some of his cars in their museum or whatever that he has them stored in. But I think he has quite a few, so I feel like it'd be cool to see them out. I think Jason mentioned it, that there were a lot of old cars out this weekend. They did I think there was an exhibition or something like that.
Oh my god, what was the one that George was driving? He was driving an old Mercedes, right?
First Mercedes, I think, was the first.
Not the first
I think
the first race car.
Vibe.
I think the first Mercedes is literally a buggy, and I would have to find a picture of it. But yeah, you guys were saying there's a lot of vintage cars out on the track.
Yeah, there's a few Benettons. If you follow, there's an account called Benetton F1 Team on Instagram, which I don't know how they got the name, but they posted it too. There's the Leighton House F1 car, sponsored F1 car that Adrian Newey helped design. That was his first F1 car.
It was one of his first ones. I just made a video on that too. Hey.
Yep. Was the team on it? Because Leighton House was the main sponsor.
Leighton House was the team name, and I think it was they owned it / sponsored it type of deal. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's Benetton there. I don't know what year. It's one of the later ones. I think 97, because it's completely blue, or maybe even later. After Schumacher.
I found
and there's a number of other cars there too, just old vintage cars. That was cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because they were also a lot of obviously a lot of vintage cars at the Monaco Historic, so it's kind of back-to-back weekends. I wonder if there were cars that were at both. I know that Zach Brown also has some of the older, some of the Senna stuff, obviously because of McLaren and stuff. So I know he got to drive. I think Gabriel Bortoleto, who was actually P2 this weekend, Brazilian F2 driver, P2 in the feature race, he drove Senna's first ever go-kart at the Monaco Historic last weekend or 2 weekends ago. Can't remember.
That's a crazy car to drive.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that go-kart's got to be 40, 50 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I loved the shirts for the tribute stuff. However, Max got a lot of shade for not wearing his shirt and being in his Red Bull team gear. However, and I can't we can't obviously say this with 100% certainty, but what I've heard from Seb and from the team is that there were a couple of shirts that were stolen by some of the fans, And the reason Max and Bottas didn't have them on were because they were like the last ones to arrive, and they didn't have any shirts left because of the ones that were stolen.
Right.
So,
Ouch.
in my favorite driver's defense, now
See, Max, I think Max would have worn the shirt if he had it. Bottas looked like he was ready to wear the outfit that he brought. You know what I mean? Like, he was, come on, man. That guy he brought that on purpose. But Max was like, yeah, I think Max would have totally worn the shirt. I fully believe the story that it got stolen. So, you know, just my take.
Continuing talking about Red Bull, Adrian Newey obviously wasn't there this weekend after announcing his departure last week or 2 weeks ago. But at the Monaco Historic, he did an interview that confirmed that he is looking to go to other teams. Right now, he's tired. He wants some time off. I think he'll definitely be away from the grid for the rest of this year, probably well into 2025. But I have a feeling that some team, probably Ferrari, is going to take a hold of him for 2026 into those new regs. And I'm scared.
Super surprised to hear that, because like all the verbiage from like the past few weeks have been, oh, he's going to retire. He's not going to go to this team or that team. Eddie Jordan, his manager, like his agent, Eddie Jordan's totally different guy. There's so much more to him. He owned an F1 team, but Eddie Jordan is his manager, and he did a podcast interview, and he was like, yeah, I don't see him going to another team. I think he's going to relax. He's not going to go anywhere. I got to find that interview, because it's like him, Newey, and like whoever the interviewer was, like a small YouTube channel, probably somebody well known in the paddock, did it and posted it. But the whole time they're just like reminiscing about the history and saying, oh yeah, Newey's probably going to relax and do nothing and retire. But hearing this
Newey
now,
was on the pod. He was on that pod.
Yeah, I gotta find it again. It was crazy that he like actually gave this interview.
Yeah, because he doesn't do a
and
lot
they
of
talked
like
about it.
formal media, right? He just kind of hangs out. Like,
No, he doesn't have to. As like an engineer, he really doesn't have to. Yeah.
I will say though, that's the one guy I really want to read a book on after he retires. If he could write an autobiography or something like that, I would love to read that, because he has
the one memoir.
He has a memoir.
Yeah, how to build a race car. It was 2019, I think he wrote it.
Okay.
So it goes all the way from like the start and like his champ car days, IndyCar, when he moved over to Leighton House, to like talking about Senna's death and how that hit him so hard he almost left the sport, because he designed that car, the car Senna died in.
Yeah.
So, but could the effects this weekend of him not being there, because this was the first official race he wasn't there and helping the team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to do that with FP1 and the struggles that Red Bull had during free practice. I don't know that it's directly linked with it being their first weekend without him for such a long time. I mean, again, he was at Red Bull for, I want to say, 17 years since their very beginning, kind of part of the core three. So obviously that's going to have an effect on the team. But I don't know that this weekend's struggles were fully down to him not being there.
Unless he is super involved with car setup, I don't think it was down to him either.
Yeah. I think it's like it's one of those. It's either absolutely 100% or no, it's way too early to be even saying that his effect is
only
like
one
that
race.
hard. Because that's fundamentally it. If he is really, really the key person that decides what that car setup is going to be, then yeah, that's huge. Absolutely. That could have been a massive detriment this weekend. But if it's like more of a team effort, then no, I don't think so. I think this was just maybe just a weekend where, God forbid, Red Bull was off. You know? Like, I mean, it's just how it goes.
Yeah, I liked what Max kind of said. He said in the press conference after quali, he was like, I think this might be the first time in 5 or 6 years that, obviously we had that time in Singapore where they were off. They were very off the pace, but they were still fourth. And I think he was like, this is the first time I can remember that we've made a turnaround. Like Singapore, they were bad and there was no changing it.
Yeah.
But they made a huge jump. Like they were terrible in free practice. It was hard to watch.
Yeah.
Rebel fan. Max was flying. The FIA added, the gravel traps on the insides and outsides of a lot of corners, which a lot of drivers took a trip through. So it was just an off weekend for them.
It's interesting to hear though, because like, again, like you said, normally he's confident coming out of practice if they're not doing too well. Be like, oh, well, race pace, we're getting set up for this, blah, blah, blah. But him to actually say that, like, yeah, we turned around. Like, there was a chance that they did not we're not going to have a good weekend at all. And the fact that they worked
they
hard
almost
enough
didn't.
They almost didn't. Yeah. I don't know.
We'll get into that. They almost got caught at the end, but
yeah,
it's surprising to see they're just so off of it. But Max can just deal with the car. Obviously, Perez wasn't able to. He was like couldn't even make it Q3. But Max just has something else in him where he could deal with a bad car and make that flip and set up in like driving style.
Yep.
A lot of the commentators towards the end of the race were like, Max used all the 57 or 58 race wins he has, the experience that brings you to win this race. Because I think, honestly, if it would have been Perez in that situation where Perez is leading the race with Lando coming up behind him, I don't know that we would have had the same outcome with a Red Bull win. I think Lando probably would have gotten the best of him. I think you have to have a perfect driver to pull off what he pulled off. But I want to talk about a different driver briefly who did FP1, Ollie Behrman. He did a great job for Haas, but his weekend overall was terrible. He is 19th or 20th in the standings for F2. Yet he did so well in F1 when he came in Jeddah, and he did really well in the Haas when he came in for FP1. So
where did he finish in FP1 again?
Oh, I don't know. I can check. I want to say it was towards the back of the pack, but for Haas, I think it was quite normal, let's say.
Right.
Like, I think as impressive as jumping in the car was in Saudi Arabia, he was still well off the pace of, like, Leclerc. And I don't know how much of it says about him as a driver jumping into a Ferrari, which was the second best car at the time, to go from 11th to 7th. Like, he did a great job. Yeah. But to be honest, I don't know if that one performance is going to be indicative of how good he's going to be. He's really good, and he's more than likely going to get that Haas seat next year. But his performances in Formula 2, like I watched the F2 sprint race, he just couldn't catch anybody. I mean, he finished, I think he finished in the points. He's like 7th, 8th, 9th. Like, he was somewhere back there. But I don't think that's any points for the sprint race.
Yeah,
and he's racing for. Is he racing for Prima right now?
Yeah, and they're probably one of the best teams in F2.
Yeah,
he was on to win. I mean, it was still very early in the F2 feature race, but he was pretty much on to win. And then his car stalled in the pits, and he ended up 19th in the race. He's 20th in the standings. He was 15th for Haas in FP1. So again, not the greatest showing, but I think when you're on a weekend,
that's what you'd expect.
Exactly, especially when you're on a weekend where he's going from F2 practice where he crashed, then you're going into the Haas to do an FP1 session and then going back to an F2 car to qualify, where he qualified, I want to say 4th. And then you go back and then you're straight into a race and then another race in F2. So I think all in all, for a weekend where it was really hectic for him, he did a good job. Same with Jeddah. But I get what you're saying. Maybe it's not enough, to get him in F1. We'll see. Oscar was flying. I, after practice, thought Oscar was going to take pole. I really did.
It was all great. It came in handy.
He was so close, so impressive. And it's unfortunate he has that good penalty from blocking Magnussen in Q1. Because during the race, he just couldn't really pass anybody. He did end up finishing ahead of Sainz, I believe, because of pit strategy. Like, he was just able to pit earlier, go faster, get around, because Imola is such a difficult track to overtake at. But he definitely had the same pace as Norris and probably could also fought for the win if it wasn't for that third penalty.
Yeah. What do you think happened to Alonso? Not to cut you off there, Tristan. But what happened to your main man who has your double points in fantasy? Because he crashed in practice and in FP3, and then qualifying P19, and then he starts from the pit lane, had just a terrible race. It was just that session.
I got a little birdie in the garage. He's telling me a couple of things, and he's telling me this. He said, Alonso is going to win the Monaco Grand Prix. We're getting ready for it this weekend. So, by tanking today, expectations are going down, and Alonso, I'm willing to bet, is a closeted gambler. He's going to gamble on himself. Now his odds are going to be so low that he's going to put it all. We're going to put it all on him, and he's going to win next weekend. And that's what's happening. That's exactly what happened. I promise, 100%. No, I mean, the rumor again. They've said that they are prepping for next weekend, but still, I don't understand a P19 qualifying effort in general.
Especially when Stroll finished like 8th in the points, right? He was 8th or 9th this weekend.
Ninth,
something
I
like
think.
that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. Because, again, we were talking pre-show, a little bit of F1 fantasy, and I didn't get to update my thing beforehand. I was too busy, and he just destroyed me this weekend. So
I had Stroll on my team, so I'm...
Well,
did I? I think I took Stroll out of my team.
Yeah, I have Stroll. I have Stroll.
You definitely have Stroll.
Charles. I think I had a good weekend. But you did put 3 times on what? On Charles or Carlos?
On Sainz, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Jason takes me this weekend. But Logan also didn't even set a time for quali, which I didn't catch until after. It just wasn't Williams' weekend. They had the power issue in practice, and then they had Logan not even setting a lap. Do you think Logan's seat is there any chance he's saving the seat, or is that seat going to someone else next year?
Who would it go to?
Well, here's my new theory, because we saw Valtteri Bottas coming out of the Williams motorhome. So I think it'd be quite cool for him to end his career where it started, back at Williams.
Yep.
On the
Especially
other hand,
with James Vowles.
Valtteri, it's James. However, the official story out of the Williams camp is that Valtteri ran out of coffee and went to Williams to get coffee, and I don't believe that. I think that's straight bullshit.
I think he could totally do that. I'm just surprised they ran out of coffee, but they would let him in.
They totally. He owns a coffee company. So in what world does he run out of coffee? I think it's straight cap. There's no.
What team runs out of coffee? You know what I mean?
The budget cuts from the catering. We all saw what happened to Red Bull when they overspend on coffee. So.
Yeah.
I love that.
But I can see Valtteri. I can see Valtteri Williams. Maybe. I don't know. I think that's the golden goose question. It's just like I don't realistically have anything on my mind right
keep
now.
him.
Huh?
I don't think Audi would keep him because Audi, Sauber, but soon to be Audi, they want Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg's going there next year. Are they going to keep Guan Yu Zhou or Valtteri Bottas? Well, they already got their veteran in Hülkenberg.
Yeah.
And Zhou is kind of a toss-up where he's like young enough where he could still develop. And he also brings money with him from fans from China. So
I don't know.
I think
I see Zhou and you going to Haas.
That's another option too. But I don't see Audi wanting to keep Bottas. Like Audi, I see Bottas and Hülkenberg as kind of equals right now. So I don't see him really wanting to stick around with Audi. I could totally see him moving to Williams, even Haas, but I think Williams is where he wants to go.
Negating even the fact of like Carlos Sainz. Would Carlos Sainz end up in Audi? I mean, Audi, him and Hülkenberg side by side, maybe. I don't know. He's got the Audi connection, so
before.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's a golden question. Is like that Williams seat is such a question mark. It's crazy. Like
I think there's a lot of seats that are so wide open. Like I think Williams, there's like 4 or 5 drivers you could name that could go there. And I think that's the biggest thing this season has been looking at the driver market is like I have no idea who's going where.
Yeah. I think we could all agree that Sargent is out. Like he has 17 races, but he's probably out.
I will say James Vowles did say that everything they're looking at, all the contracts they potentially signing, any news that comes out will be for 2025 and beyond. They will give Logan the courtesy of ending off the season, which I think is the right thing to do. As much as like Red Bull has this thing where they're constantly taking drivers out in the middle of the season or doing driver swaps, I think the right thing is to end off a year, especially because the Williams, they're not that fast. They don't have any points. I don't think they have any points this year. So it's not like if you put in a Kimi Antonelli or whatever that's been half a season in F2, it's not like he's going to do much better, in my opinion. I think it's just better to have every driver finish out wherever they are for the season, and then move on for 2025. But
I agree.
what do you make of Perez's performance? Because Perez was quite literally gone.
He almost seemed like he was coming back after end of last year, and then the start of this year, he did really good.
He's been consistent.
But this weekend was just a total shocker. Like, as soon as that car is difficult to drive, he can't adjust like Max does.
Yeah.
Like, Max is able to drive a bad car and make the adjustments, and like right after practice say, oh, you know what? We're going to change this to qualifying, go into qualifying even faster and better than practice. And he did. And the team made the adjustments. He's able to adapt to the car. But Perez just couldn't figure out what those adjustments were for him in his driving style or setup, and was just nowhere. I really love to see that Ricardo out-qualified him by 1 spot. So Perez had to deal with Ricardo right in front of him. I mean, obviously Ricardo didn't finish ahead, but it was funny to see his technical direct rival, other than Sainz, be right in front of him.
It's also 2 weekends in a row where Checo has not been on the podium. So I mean, it's been since I think Japan. No, China. He was on the podium in China.
Yes.
And I mean, granted, two weeks in a row without the podium, yeah, sure. But like, again, in that car, like, no.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also, like we were talking about a little bit before the pod, there's a couple things. But firstly, with McLaren getting so close, and with those upgrades the way they are, with Oscar and Lando both being so consistent, you absolutely need 2 drivers that are going to make the most of every single weekend. And I think that's where right now what's probably weighing on Red Bull's minds and Christian Horner's mind is, I don't think Sergio Perez is the man to do that, but is Carlos Sainz? Or is Daniel Ricciardo? Or is Liam Lawson? Or is it Yuki Tsunoda? Like they're in one of those situations where they have too many options to choose from, and you don't want... think the fans will hate them if they get Daniel Ricciardo completely out of F1. But at the same time, you have Liam waiting, and he's only getting older, and he's, been out for a while. So there's that. I think, to your point with Max also, is there's 2 things that come to mind. Firstly, Alex, on, I think it was like a High Performance podcast. There was a podcast he did where he was talking about Max's ability to drive the car, and he goes, imagine going to the video game and putting the setting on the most... like the most finicky you can, the hardest to drive.
Highest sensitivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how he drives. He can drive that immaculately, and that's the difference between him and other people. The other thing is, I was listening to him talk about his dad, and his dad raising him, and him saying, my dad would go and he'd make a small adjustment on the go-kart, and then he'd send me out for a couple laps, and I had to come back in and tell my dad what he had changed. And I think that teaches you kind of where the changes need to be made, which I think is a good asset for any driver. I think my grandma talks about Lewis being really good at that a lot, and I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Drivers that can make those key setup changes. But anyways, also, Max, 8th pole in a row, that equals Senna's record, which I think was pretty symbolic, being in Imola 30 years on since his crash.
Yep.
Did you guys have any confidence in the McLarens and the Ferraris to take pole?
I mean, I did going into the weekend with Ferrari. Again, it was just how do I describe it? Like an emotionally driven.
So good in qualifying.
Yeah, it was an emotionally driven weekend because I was just like, we're in Italy. Whenever we're in Italy, I always think the Ferraris are going to do good. And I mean, they weren't off the pace. Like, they had definitely a good chance of taking pole, but it just didn't come to fruition, I guess. But then McLaren just sideswiped everybody, basically. I thought, Oscar and Orlando could have taken pole. But then, of course, Max out of nowhere. So, I mean, I had confidence, but where they ended up in qualifying, I'm not surprised, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really thought after all practices that it would be Leclerc or Norris on pole.
Yeah.
And it was almost Oscar, actually. And both of the Ferraris were just behind, which is weird because Leclerc is always so good in qualifying. A little bit disappointing, but Max really had to fight for it, and he got it. So,
yeah.
To be fair, in y'all's defense, I do think that Max was not the fastest in quali. He did take pole, and the commentator said it over and over again that I finally said, okay, fine, I believe you. Whereas actually Oscar was faster during quali because Max had a toe. He said it in the post-quali press conference. He goes, me and Nico Hulkenberg decided to be toe buddies. So he would give me a toe down to turn 2, and then I'd give him a toe through turn 17 at the end of the lap to start his lap. So I think that was part of the reason why in qualifying, Nico was able to. He was like P2 at some point. Like at the end,
I didn't see that.
he was second. Yeah, which was crazy. And so he put in some amazing laps, but I think both of them benefited from that little relationship that they that they created during quali, where they were
because neither of them had their teammates. They had to work together if they wanted a slipstream.
Yep. I will also say, like, Hulkenberg, this unsung hero of the year so far, is his qualifying efforts have been fantastic.
Absolutely.
He's totally stepped up past Magnussen. Like, I think back to 2018 when Haas was at their peak with Magnussen and Grosjean. And usually during qualifying, it was a dead heat. Grosjean would more often pull off the quicker lap. But Magnussen was always there.
Yep.
And I've just been so surprised that Hulkenberg still has the pace and is still outpacing Magnussen most weekends. It's so weird to see. Like, start of the year, I would have said, Magnussen will beat him, no problem. But now we're here, and Hulkenberg has like found a second wind to his career and is faster than Magnussen. Yep. So, like, K-Mag's seat is definitely at risk. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in like sports cars or IndyCar next year.
Yeah, totally fair.
And I think kind of moving into the race, it's been a huge factor in why K-Mag is in the situation that he's in, where he's only 2 penalty points away from having a race ban. He's been in these situations where he's not fighting for points. He's fighting for 11th or 12th or 13th, where he's defending so that his teammate can get points.
Yeah. They finished like 11th and 12th though, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think they were 11th and 12th or 11th.
So like pretty good showing either way. Yeah, that shows it.
11th, 12th,
Hulkenberg 11th, K-Mag 12th. Like still really good showing.
Arguably, K-Mag had the better race because he did qualify further back, so he was able to make up more positions. But also, Nico was fighting with Yuki, and Yuki was so determined. It was one of the closest battles on track all race. Kind of moving into the race, it was one of the, besides like maybe Oscar and Sainz, Yuki was flying. Yep. I thought he kind of deserved driver of the day, honestly, because he put out a great showing.
Well, he didn't qualify in the top 10, did he? No, he did.
Yes, he was 7th.
So he fell off a little bit, but I mean, I think that's the main reason probably why I didn't, because I think he was like P7 in qualifying, dropped down to P10. Yeah. But still, I mean, battled adversity to get to P10. So yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
They're not
disappointment.
There, yeah.
Sorry, disappointment of the weekend goes to Oscar Piastri from that penalty from qualifying. If he would have started second, I think he would have been the one fighting for the lead. And who knows, maybe they would have actually fought for the lead.
Yeah.
True.
And Oscar may have got his first win, but that's like, who knows what could have happened. Sainz kept him behind. They jumped him in the pit stops, so Oscar ended up finishing ahead. But he'll have another chance. He's always so consistent. Like, Red Bull needs a lineup like Ferrari has, where both drivers are always neck and neck. Or
Red Bull needs a lineup like McLaren, man. 2 really young kids going at it, pretty much. I mean, sure, McLaren's young too, but I don't know. Well, I think McLaren's gonna be the team to beat 5 years from now. That's all I could say.
2 years from now.
Yeah, next year, 2026.
Or next year.
Oh, I don't know. I think we're gonna be surprised. I really do. I don't know.
So
I think engine regs are going to cause all sorts of mayhem.
They could be the team to beat by the end of the year. Like, literally, they could win.
Yeah.
They could win the Constructors' Championship.
Like, if really Prez is nowhere. Weekends in a row. Miami and now this. I mean, for real.
Yeah. McLaren could take the Constructors.
Yeah, well, think about
Steven would be happy.
Yeah, Steven would love this.
Rest in peace, Steven, but he would be happy.
If you think about last year, you go back to last year, when they brought those upgrades, they were so consistent. They were so good. And they ended last year on such a high. But what they've essentially done this year is brought those upgrades that much sooner. And with, like we were talking about, with Perez finishing, I think it was 8th, and qualifying so poorly in P11, if he's not, we know Max can be consistent. If Perez is consistent, like you said, they could be the team to be by the end of the year. They could take the Constructors quite easily. I think there may be 50 points, 55 points behind Red Bull at this point, because they did outscore them this weekend again. Yeah. So I don't know. I absolutely think that they could be the team to beat by the end of the year. And next year, I think we're gonna have like three-way fight maybe for the title.
Potentially.
Absolutely. What did you make of Alex Albon's little pit kerfuffle? His
Yeah,
tire.
what 4 or 5 pit stops this race,
Uh,
and then he had to
Albon?
retire.
I
Yeah,
think he had
5 including the retirement.
5
And he got a penalty as well in
10-second
between all of that. Yeah.
release because his tire wasn't fitted properly when they sent him out, so they gave him a penalty for that.
Mhm.
And
Wait,
then go for it.
did they? Sorry, did they just call it a day? Like, did they DNF? Like, just be like, we're done. Like, we're gonna bring the car back. We're
I
done.
think so.
Or was it? Yeah.
Because
They're already a lap down.
They were
Yeah.
2 laps down by the end. But the funny thing is, I think they actually did run almost to the very end of the race. They DNF'd maybe 5 to 10 laps before the end. It's not like they had that pit issue and they were like, okay, we're done. Let's call it a day. It's good enough. But they come in, they pit, they have that issue. And they pit again to fix the issue. And then they have to pit again and they serve their penalty. And then they pit one more time. And then they were like, you know what? It's done. Call it a day. We've had like 4 or 5 pit stops at this point. I think our pit stop practice is enough. Alex is done. They just had so many hardships this weekend. But let's talk about the ending of the race because I was so scared. As a Red Bull fan, this took me back to like 2021 deja vu, where it was like you're sitting in front of the TV like, who is going to win this race?
Yeah.
Like
The Jaws theme in the background as Lando inches closer and closer.
I was watching with like the F1 TV data screen on, like every second, like Norris 0.2 there, 0.3 there.
Oh my god,
and
I love it.
So then like 15 laps from the end, Norris was basically matching, maybe 0.2, 0.3, okay. But then final 10 laps, he turned it up. He was almost a second quicker every lap. It was ridiculous to watch. And if he had 5 more laps, which obviously you don't, you plan for this. Like the strategists know exactly how much tire and energy and fuel you can use to the end. So like you can't just say, oh, add 5 more laps and Norris would have won. Because then all the teams would have had to adjust it for the 5 extra laps. And it might have just finished the same way because, Hannah Schmidt and Red Bull strategy just figured all that out ahead of time of how hard Max can push. And kind of, I don't see it as a total disappointment because this shows that McLaren is probably going to take the fight to Red Bull this year. And it wasn't just a one-off race at Miami.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what was interesting to me was, so it was almost like I thought Max had, like you said, maybe 15 to 20 laps before the end. I thought Max was pretty safe. Honestly, I think he was maybe 6 or 7 seconds ahead. Like, he's good. But Charles was actually catching Lando. He started catching him at like a second a lap, and I was like, that's... But then Charles made a mistake. And this is the difference. I was talking to one of our family friends about it right before the pod. It was like, that is the difference between some, like, your world championship caliber drivers. And not to say that Charles will never win a world championship, because people will attack me for that. And I do think he's championship material, but there is a difference at this very moment with drivers like Lando and like Charles and Max, because even Lando, I think he would have caught him on the last lap had he not made a small mistake coming out of, I want to say it was the Villeneuve chicane, where he was very nearly in the gravel. It cost him like a 10th or 2. And I think that was the difference between him having DRS 2 or 3 laps earlier and not having DRS. He's like 1.09, behind, whereas I think he would have been in the DRS.
Yeah, just a couple more tenths, and he would have had at least 1 or 2 laps with that DRS.
Yeah.
But I think, like you were talking about, like the crucial part too was that it wasn't just McLaren catching; it was Red Bull conceding all of that time. I was like, you were watching the timing screens. I was listening to Max Verstappen's radio. He was so mad. He was like, guys, this car is undrivable. I cannot turn into turn 6. My tires are gone, for lack of better words. The words he used are not appropriate for the podcast, but tires are gone. And he couldn't get anything. I think it just shows the troubles they had this weekend, and it was so close.
Yeah.
And as much as I'm a Max Verstappen fan, I think Lando has been driving superbly. He deserved the driver of the day that he got.
Oscar too. He has, like, so many people hype up so many young drivers. Like De Vries was hyped up like crazy.
Yeah.
Or Liam Lawson, but he deserves some of the hype. Or like Mick Schumacher. but very few have delivered in the way that Oscar Piastri actually has, or like Norris has when he joined. They actually show up and then put in the performances. Or Leclerc was hyped up same way, and he performed. But then some drivers just can't. Like, I think back to like Brendan Hartley, Le Mans winner, comes in, can't do anything. So really great to see both McLarens and Norris put on the show today.
You look back on with Oscar last year, how Marina mentioned earlier, like that team really scaled late in the year because those upgrades came and then they were consistent. Well, Oscar was consistently P3. Like he could
deal with the pressure.
Yeah, right behind Lando. They were a dynamic duo. And like you said, that scales for rookies. Like he's still performing. Like he's still doing really good.
Learning, and he's still getting better. Do you think that though that he's overshadowed by Lando a little bit? Just kind of like when Lando first came in, how he maybe was a little bit overshadowed by Carlos Sainz. When you're so closely matched with your teammate teammate is someone who everyone considers to be world championship caliber. Is that intimidating? Does it like overshadow you in the public eye? I mean, everybody's talking about Lando could take the win here, but Oscar outqualified him in Miami. He also outqualified him here. So
I think you get overshadowed naturally because we look at almost every single team on the grid. And I would say Ferrari is probably the one exception, but every team you can kind of notably be like, that's the person you think of first. Red Bull, it's Max. Mercedes, it's Lewis Hamilton. McLaren, you think of Lando, right? So like
because he's been there for so many years.
Exactly.
That's the only reason I think why. Yep. Like Oscar, all he needs to do is just keep doing what he's doing because he beats Lando some weekends. He beat Lando in qualifying. He won the sprint race before Lando did ever win a sprint race or anything. So I think all Oscar needs to do is keep it up, and he'll be remembered as Oscar Piastri, not as the guy who races for McLaren with Lando.
That's kind of what I was going to end it with, was like, obviously that overshadowing does exist, but he's out there. He's getting points. He's getting podiums. Like, I mean, he's like, he will be, again, this is another like kind of fast forward look at it, but maybe 3 or 4 years from now, like potential top 3 on the grid. You never know, right? I mean, of drivers.
Could be end of this year.
Could be end of this year. You never know. It takes one breakout kind of deal. Kind of like Max. I mean, I understand it's an aggressive stance, but like Max, his breakout year, if we want to, I don't think the championship
was his second year.
Yeah, it was his second year. Second year in the, what's it called? For,
when he moved.
Yeah, but Rosso, that second year was with Red Bull. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
he moved season, and then he really shined. He had that win, that first race with Red Bull. He won, and then it kind of took off from there. I think there's a chance with the way these upgrades are going for him to pick up his first win in his second year, which, not to take any credit away from Lando, because he's been in the sport for a while. He is a great driver. But if Oscar can win his second year, that's a lot for put his name up there with Lando Norris and be like, you think of Lando first and then me, but why don't you think of me first? Because maybe I am the better driver.
Yeah,
maybe I'm better and so you never know. I think also he came in, like you said, with so much hype. So it's like he won F3 his rookie year. He won F2 his rookie year. Now he spent a year out, and we had all that drama with him going to Alpine and then not going to Alpine and being like, I've signed for McLaren. So he did come in with so much expectation, and I think he delivered. So
100%.
Let's end off with a couple highlights. The first one is one that we didn't talk about a little earlier, but it was most people didn't catch this. I don't think they put it on the live broadcast, but George Russell, he did pit later on in the race. He had a second pit stop because it was a cheap, easy pit stop. It would only put him behind his teammate. But he kept telling the team, is like, if these tires are going to make it to the end of the race, I don't want to pit because Lewis is not going to give me this position. They were like, he was asking, like, if I pit, will Lewis give me the position back? And they were like, no, you're going to be 20 seconds behind him. So he was not having it. He did not want to pit because he did not want to finish behind Lewis. But they did pit him.
I don't know why the team did that. Like, he wouldn't have dropped off. He had, before he pit, it was like 28.
26.
It was something like that. Seconds back to Perez.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it was unnecessary in terms of drop off, unless Mercedes thought maybe he wouldn't make it to the end of the race. He did pit really early, but everybody else made it to the end of the race. So I didn't see him like all of a sudden like a tire exploding, unless he pushed super, super hard, which honestly, I don't think he did. He overtook maybe Perez, and then everything else was
Yeah.
kind of middle of nowhere. So
Yeah.
it was kind of expected. Jason put this on the sheet. It was the first modern race in Imola without a safety car, which is interesting.
Pretty incredible.
There were 3 or 4 in the F2 feature, the F2 F3 sprint races on Saturday. So I was expecting there to be at least one in F1. I know that the level of driving between F3 and F2 to F1 is still a big jump. Only the best of the best from F2 and F3 come to F1, but still, I was expecting a little bit. It was a very clean race.
Lewis ran off track at one point. You know, didn't Verstappen make a small mistake in the chicane too?
I don't know if it was. I think it was Leclerc. I don't think Max ever fully cut the
Not
chicane.
during the race. Got it.
But
Yeah. So there's a few drivers that made mistakes, but nothing bad. Oh, Perez had a big mistake run off. He locked up and ran super wide.
Yeah.
But that's that reminds me of when Perez spun under safety car back in 21. So I always remember that one.
Do that. I'm not a driver. I'm not even a rookie driver. I'm nobody. I can't drive.
Drivers that have spun under safety car.
Well, that reminds me of that video.
In fact, I don't even have my driver's license, so I can't be talking. But still, if you're the best of the best, the top 20 drivers, potentially top 20 drivers in the world, how do you spin under a safety car?
What was that video? I think it was Latifi in front of Bottas, who his engineer was talking to him. Was oh, so this is where we're at, standing here. Yeah, Kimmy. Kimmy. And the Williams in front of him just lost control, went into the wall. It was under a safety car. Yeah. And it's oh, the Williams is off. The Williams is off. Oh, never mind. That makes us P10. Very nice.
So I gotta find as far as I remember, that was 2020 Imola Grand Prix. As far as I remember, people that have spun under a safety car have been Valtteri Bottas 2018, Latifi 2020, Perez 2021, and I don't know if George did ever, but he might have at some point. Just throwing that in there just in case.
Put Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas with Latifi. Those are different caliber drivers.
Yeah.
In my opinion, at least.
I think Perez and Bottas are the same level.
Oh, but they're better. They're higher than Latifi, for sure.
Yeah.
Despite
Latifi doesn't even drive anymore.
Bottas is better than... I think Bottas is better than Perez. I think he's more consistent, and I think consistency in F1 is everything. Especially when you're at a top team where all you have to do, obviously he's not considered in the same regard as Hamilton because Hamilton beat him so often, but all you have to do is finish second and then be able to finish first when your teammate has a bad weekend. Not that that's it's all you have to do. Makes it sound easy, but it is the expectation when you're at a team like that. And I don't think my mom and my dad, they're why do you hate Perez so much? I don't hate him. I just think that for a team like Red Bull, they need a better second driver.
Yeah.
But that's just me. Also, the first Ferrari on the podium in Imola since Schumacher in 2006, which I was shocked by.
That's crazy.
It's really been that long.
But also, Imola was off the schedule for quite a while, right?
Yeah, it wasn't until 2020 when it came back as a fill-in race for all the canceled races during COVID.
Yeah.
And then it just remained on the schedule. They said, let's run it again. And then they did. So
run it back.
All the drivers talked this weekend about loving this track so much, especially I think qualifying wise. It was a great qualifying, but for the race, it's so hard to overtake. You have pretty much one overtaking opportunity, and that's going into turn 1 after the main straight with the DRS. And if you have to be maybe 5 tenths away when the DRS opens to even be able to be close enough to overtake.
Yeah.
So I understand why it was off the calendar for a while because I just think it's so hard with these cars. It's never going to be one of those outstanding races in my opinion. But
I think if the car changes, it can be. The car needs to be smaller. Let's just make it smaller, and then that's fine. Maybe it will be a great racetrack. I don't know. I'm a hater. I'm a hater of the big car.
I am too. I think, but it will go a little bit smaller for 2026. Not anything super, super significant, but I think it is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
For all the Stroll lovers, it was his 150th race, and he did get points. So
I think we have the only Stroll lover possible in the world is in this podcast, maybe.
Yeah, I tried to defend him, but it's been tough recently. Multi-time podium finisher, pole position setter, and only other driver than Max Verstappen to jump from F3 to F1 and
Dude,
skip
you have
Formula
that
2.
intro memorized. You say it every
Yeah.
time we bring him up.
I have to say it. Very surprising of how he like nailed the setup, nailed the pace, nailed the racecraft, like moved up into the points and fall.
Yeah.
Otherwise than Alonso,
Right.
which was nowhere, absolutely nowhere this weekend.
Alonso pitted
So
times. He went on softs at the end. He had the fastest lap for a while, but it was because he came out pitted and everybody else was on like 20 lap old tires.
Yep.
He did the fastest lap, so it wasn't anything super significant.
so
he finished
have to
nice.
applause Stroll this weekend. Great job.
the first
You
time
did the
he's,
thing.
like,
You got the
above
points.
teammate. His first time this season he's been above Alonso or no?
I don't know, actually, off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't even think Alonso has DNF'd at all this year. So I think this is genuinely his first finish against Alonso ahead.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about McLaren potentially beating out Red Bull in the constructors, but Leclerc did overtake Perez in the Drivers' Championship. Norris also overtook Sainz. They were tied for points. And Hamilton overtook Alonso. So drivers moving up in the world slightly. And Red Bull, they're only like 50 points ahead of Ferrari. So
only 50 points.
But that's a first in maybe a 2 race win where Red Bull isn't able to do anything. I mean, take one more race or a couple more races where Checo is where he's at, right where he was this race, and where Max is not able to win. Say that's a Ferrari win or a McLaren win. That can be cut down so fast.
Just one more Australia, and then you never know, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Knock on wood. Knock on wood. So, all right. Predictions for Monaco next weekend.
Monaco next weekend.
More expensive food. You know
why?
More
expensive food.
Because last weekend we saw Miami with the crazy food prices, and this is the food prices from Imola this weekend. If you can't read that, that's a bottle of water for €2 and pizza for €3. And of course, in Miami, water is like $7. So it was nice to see that they had some reasonably priced food.
Reasonably priced.
And it's just Miami. Sorry, I wanted to get that in there. That's my prediction. You could go ahead, Tristan.
For Jason, very expensive food. Predictions for Tristan. I will actually talk about the race car drivers, unfortunately, but I'm gonna do my one stupid prediction of the year. I'm having Alonso winning this race. I'm having it happen.
He's won it before.
I trust the process. This weekend was the precursor. He's the impending doom of the drivers. They do not know. The rookie is going to come into the track. He's going to take him.
He's saving his talent for next weekend, is what you're saying. He didn't use any of his talent this weekend.
He's saving it up.
It was his twin brother in the car, so he could focus on next weekend, right?
Yes, his doppelganger.
Okay.
Now, screw it. Alonso P1, Max P2, Charles Leclerc P3. I'm doing it. It's full send.
It's in real prediction now.
Real prediction.
I'm going after my horrific Ferrari predictions last weekend. Max, it's generally hard to say Max P1 now because McLaren's upgrades on these twisty circuits like Miami and Imola have been so good that I'm afraid that next weekend it's going to be even better.
Yeah.
That's so tough to say, but I'm gonna have to say Max P1, Norris P2, and Oscar P3. And no Ferraris on the podium next weekend.
Double McLaren podium. I like it. Listen, I'm gonna go. I know Ferrari they always have a great, or they have a history of having a great quali car, not so good of a race car. And qualifying is so important in Monaco. However, Charles Leclerc has probably the worst track record ever in Monaco. It's just terrible. He always either messes up or gets screwed over or something happens. I mean, he's DNS'd in Monaco. He's DNF'd by crash. He's gotten strategy messed up by Ferrari. So unfortunately, he won't be on my podium, but I think Carlos Sainz could be a P3. I think Lando P2 and Max P1.
It's very fair and strategic podium. Personally, I think mine is cooler, but
I think yours is quite literally impossible.
Whoa. Okay, you might be right.
Hey,
but don't say it's
if
my
you're in a
face.
car racing on
All
the
about
grid,
qualifying.
you could win.
Qualifying? Oh, geez.
It's all about qualifying. That's what I'm saying. Like, essentially, you could expect that your podium prediction is pretty much where you think they'll qualify.
Yeah.
Maybe with the exception of, like, maybe Lando out-qualifies Max, and then Max, like, for mine, maybe Lando out-qualifies Max, and Max overtakes. But it's like, the chances of Lando and Max, which I think right now are the two strongest drivers, the chances of them being back to, like right next to each other the whole race are so high, and maybe coming down to, like, who can do the 2.2 versus the 2.6 second pit stop. Like, I think that's how close they are right now. So
the race is going to get decided on pit road. I mean, that's just absolutely true.
That's what happened to Ricciardo in 2016. Is he had the pole, he was leading, and Red Bull did not have the tires ready, and that's how he lost the race in 2016.
Yep.
You guys seen, what's his name? Is it Trevor Noah? Is that his name?
He's one of the late night hosts.
Yeah. Okay, so Trevor Noah, his son met Daniel Ricciardo and was a huge fan. And then he goes to Daniel Ricciardo, he goes, what happened in Monaco? It was so bad. You showed up and the team, there was no tires. It was so funny. It was the funniest thing. If you haven't seen that clip, you have to watch it. Probably.
And he was so upset about that. Like, if you saw any of the post-race stuff, he's like, I don't want to talk about it. There's no words I can say right now in front of the media.
Just get myself
I don't want to talk. And then in 2018 when he won, he's like, finally, redemption. Finally. I should have won it back then, but we won it today. Like, that stuck with him, and it probably still bothered him up until he won that race. And it probably still bothers him. He could have been a 2-time Monaco winner.
Yeah.
And even though he finally got his win, and that's probably all he cared about, is getting at least one. It was weird. Also, Monaco winner, Sergio Perez. So.
Yeah.
Also,
I think if you ask anybody with moderate knowledge of Formula One, if you could win one race, what would it be? It'd be Monaco. Right? So, like, I mean, I don't know. Pretend he doesn't win that race in 2018. He goes forever, the rest of his life. Maybe he's still racing, but he goes the rest of his life with, I had it, and then my team failed me.
Yeah,
I didn't win Monaco. Yeah, so
honestly, that's probably a little bit for Leclerc. Like, it's not even like you already say, ask anyone with modern F1 knowledge which race they want to win, and it's Monaco. That's his home race too. Yep. So, I mean, he already won Monza, so that's like Ferrari's home race. I think at some point Imola could be on the cards.
Yep.
But you really just you want it for him. Like, if there's like you could ask any F1 fan if they were happy for Lando, and everyone up and down the paddock all around the world would say, yes, I'm happy for Lando to win. And I think the same reaction would be if Charles Leclerc was able to win in Monaco. It'd be, I'm happy for him. He deserves it. So
he's got 2 boxes left to check: become a world champion and win Monaco. Like, that's literally it, So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Real quick, I do want to mention Max's side quest, because yes, he did win this race, but he also won the Nürburgring 24 hours of e-racing with his Team Redline. So I just want to throw that in there because I forgot to mention it earlier.
We love it.
Double race winner.
Super impressive. He did a stint, I believe, right after qualifying, another stint this morning before the race.
Dude is obsessed. How he even has time for a relationship is crazy.
It's so incredible of how he bought his entire sim rig over.
Yeah.
And won and set it up in the motorhome. Like, imagine being the team manager of all the logistics and saying, all right, Max needs this much room and this much storage and these electrical connections, and you need to have
this
the best
level of Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And it's what are you gonna do? Say no?
And if there's any latency, whoever's setting it up gets fired.
Exactly.
They did extensive Wi-Fi testing before he they got to the weekend. On Wednesday, they did extensive testing to make sure that there were no issues, no glitches, nothing.
Oh, I fully believe it.
And Ferrari owned the track, so I bet there had to be a discussion somewhere where a Ferrari person had to deal with getting the Wi-Fi set up for Max Verstappen.
Oh, for sure.
I think also I was thinking when I was doing my WAG Wednesday, I was thinking about this. I'm I'm pretty sure Kelly thought to herself, she was like, I'm gonna go to Miami because if I go to Imola, which is ultimately a lot closer to Monaco where we're currently living as a family, I'm not gonna see him at all. Like he's gonna the whole time.
Imola is like in the Italian countryside. Like it's legit in Italy, like a village. Well, technically Emilia Romagna. They're like technically a separate state.
Emilia Romagna, I think, is the province, right?
Well, they call it Imola.
The town.
San Marino is like
that's another country.
I think, yeah, like they have their own soccer team, and I think that's where Emilia Romagna region, and then Imola, the track, is in San Marino because it used to be called the San Marino Grand Prix. Imola. So that's, I don't know what the legal structure is still, but they still have their own international soccer team. So technically, it isn't really Italy, but it kind of is. It's kind of like how the Vatican is in Italy.
So here's what it is, right? So Emilia Romagna is the region, and San Marino is within the region, but San Marino is a country. So, like, I actually don't even know why it was called the San Marino Grand Prix, because it doesn't look like it's in San Marino. The town is not even in San Marino. I don't know. These are crazy
weird names.
Yeah. Fun. That's a fun fact. A throwback.
Fun little fact. There you go.
Your funner fact for next weekend could be all the drivers.
Yes.
All the drivers that competed in Indy, because we got IndyCar qualifying later today, actually starting soon.
We also
Marcus
have
Ericsson.
Ericsson. Ericsson. Go with your IndyCar. I got
totally bend it. So 2022 champion of the Indy 500, Marcus Ericsson, multi-time race winner in IndyCar. Ericsson has revived his career over here in North America. He crashed big in practice right before qualifying. So they had to bring in the backup car, totally redo all the setups, rebuild it, try and get the backup car ready for his setup. And they got it ready, but he went to qualifying and qualified in the bottom from 30th to however many cars run, go to last chance qualifying. And that's today. And the slowest car gets eliminated because for Indy 500, only 33 cars are allowed to race. And this year, 34 cars have entered. Like some teams only raced Indy 500. That's the only race they do all year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they have this, it's called bump day, last chance qualifying, where everybody 30 and below race for the final spots on the grid, however many cars there are. And since there's 34 cars, if he's the slowest, he might not even compete at the 500 this year. So
Graham Rahal. Graham Rahal as well.
Graham Rahal is for all my IndyCar fans, as cool as he is, and he set pole position at a different race last year.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be a driver anymore if he didn't literally own the team.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Lance Stroll situation, Marina, because Graham Rahal, his father was a legendary racer, Bobby Rahal.
Yep.
And they own the racing team. So Graham is now racing too. And he's fine. Like, he's gotten podiums, he's got pole position, he's gotten a win like 2016 or something. Very Lance Stroll-ish, where like on his day he's good, but most of the time he's horrible. And he's had another horrible week. So
I believe, I don't know if he lives in Pennsylvania anymore. I'm not sure.
He was born in PA. I bet. I don't know.
But in other news for today as well, the NASCAR All-Star race is tonight at North Wilkesboro. Historic North Wilkesboro, racing for $1 million. So I'm sure
Larson won't be there though.
More. I know you're going to bed probably soon-ish, Marina, but Jason and I are locked in.
Well, with that, join us next weekend. We may even talk Indy 500 depending on when we film the podcast, because of course it is Monaco GP Day, Indy 500, and was it Coke 600?
Coke 600. It's the greatest day in motorsports.
It is. Well, if you watched our episode where we got to know us, that was Tristan's first F1 race, was it not?
Yes, because I sat down and watched all three in one day. It was the same. It was the same deal for IndyCar and F1. It was the same time I watched the full of each. So yeah.
Well, We will be back next week, so don't forget to tune in for podcast Mondays at 11:30 Eastern Time, as well as our Instagram and TikTok for Tech Tuesday, WAG Wednesday, Throwback Thursday, Fun Fact Friday, Man on the Street videos, and our predictions. If you don't remember them from now, they will be on our Instagram on Saturday. Thanks for you guys so much for watching.